Hi, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to go over one of the 7 elements of art called values. And in order to talk about values, we're going to have to talk about hues, tints, tones, shades, contrast, and saturation. We've got a lot to go through, so let's get started. Now, value is just how light or dark a color is, and we often talk about this using a value scale. Now, value scales are typically in black and white, starting with white and moving 10 steps down to black. This was coined by Denman Ross in 1907. However, value has been a conversation among artists for centuries. Now, we use values to create focal points, atmosphere, and mood. And we do this by playing around with something called contrast. Contrast is when unlike art elements touch and intensify each other. For example, a very dark shadow touching a very bright highlight creates a focal point. And vice versa, having a very dark atmosphere with a bright figure creates a certain mood that your audience then feels. As easy as it is to explain value in black and white, the good question is, how does it apply to color? Well, last week we created a color wheel, and all the colors on the color wheel are called hues, meaning a pure color that's untouched by black and white. Now, if you add white to a hue, you get something called a tint. If your painting is entirely tints, that is called a high-key image, also known as a low contrast image. It doesn't have sharp, dark shadows next to very bright highlights, and therefore the contrast is relatively low. And vice versa, if you have a hue and you add black to it, that's called a shade. When you have a painting that's just shades, you have a low-key image, also low contrast, because there's no highlights to interact with your shadows. Now, that is how you change the value of a hue. But there's one more important thing that we always talk about when it comes to tints and shades, and that's tones. A tone is when you add neutral gray to a hue. And while it can lighten its value, it also does something important where it lowers the color's saturation. Saturation is just how intense a color is. The higher the saturation, the more vibrant the color. The lower the saturation, the closer the color is to gray. So tones can be very helpful when creating muted down palettes and can help with realism. Of course, there are other methods to getting there, but we'll talk about that in another video. So now you know what value is and how to create tints, tones, and shades with a hue to change its value and saturation. Now, of course, it can be really challenging as a beginning artist to figure out whether or not your contrast is right, your saturation is working, is the picture even balanced? All of those very confusing questions. So I have a tip for you. For this, you're going to need to use a smartphone with a camera setting. I'm going to be using an iPhone 13, and I'm already going to be in my camera function with photos. I'm going to swipe up till I get the photo menu, and I'm going to scroll all the way over to the 3 circles and click on it. It's going to give me settings, and I'm going to swipe all the way until I can find the one that says mono, meaning monochromatic. It's going to change all the colors in front of me into values, which is really helpful for me to evaluate where my areas of high contrast are and if there's anything that's out of balance. So give it a try. I hope you found this information useful and will begin to play around with value, contrast, and saturation in your own art practice. For more educational videos on art, go ahead and check out my last video on the color wheel and hit that subscribe button. And if you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time.